Disclaimer. This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence that may be disturbing to some listeners. Please be advised.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Taylor.
I'm Mandy.
I'm Amanda. I was just thinking about how we did it last time, and I was trying to not do it
Not
that
do
way.
the same. Well, you should have gone hello, so then we could all be hello, hello, hello.
Oh,
but then we
like
did.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
There you go.
R.I.P.
This is Pop Crime and Wine. Welcome.
Welcome.
Today is a very special day because later on we are going to kind of dive back into our investigative interviewing skills with another ID channel.
Yeah, we're pretty much pros.
Docuseries. Yeah, we're like, I'm super excited
Professionals.
Professional.
because
Professionals.
we're talking to Detective Moran from a new docuseries called Deadly Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
On the ID Discovery. I'm just kidding.
Stop.
ID channel.
It takes place in Chicago. He works in Chicago, and it is about the John Wayne Gacy victims.
Yes. More specifically, the unidentified ones. There are 3 episodes, I believe.
Yes.
And he does end up uncovering evidence and
He.
what am I trying to
So
say?
there are 8
Help.
unidentified victims of John Wayne Gacy. They reopen the case, and he is working on identifying those victims.
And he does end up getting
he does,
there.
yes.
We're just not going to tell you which ones.
You have to
because
watch
you have
it.
to watch.
Yes.
Or
it's-
just listen to the end of this.
The first episode actually aired on Sunday this week, but you can watch it online or on there again. And then the next 2 episodes will be coming out for everyone to see.
Yes. So we did I had to do some research. Everybody kind of has heard about John Wayne Gacy, and they, have seen maybe like serial killer shows or specials on him, but a lot of the details I was not aware of. Sorry.
Can I stop you right there?
Yes, I was staring at my Christmas tree.
I know.
How
and
have we not opened the wine yet?
Yeah, I'm sitting here holding the wine like,
confusing.
hello, what are we doing here?
We can't get into the case
I was
yet.
in business mode. I'm a professional now, y'all.
It's like bing, bang, boom, done.
I'm like, gotta
Get
talk
out of my
about
way.
it.
We get to the end of this and not
Taylor
even
and
open
I
up
are
the
sitting here
wine.
like, but what about the
I'm like,
wine?
over here
What about the wine?
waving my arms like, what's happening? I need fermented grapes in my mouth.
So who is this week's sponsor?
So funny you should ask. A previous sponsor loved our episode so much that she wanted to sponsor another episode. So Heather Anderson went ahead and bought us another bottle of wine.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather,
You're so
times
sweet.
2. And it's called 7 Moons.
It's such a cool bottle.
It has a black cork.
That I'm about to pop.
She's
right?
all about to pop it.
Ooh.
Nice.
I can imagine. I feel like that's the best one we've ever had.
She's gonna
You
cut
are
it and use that.
welcome.
You should be the popper from now
I'm a
on.
fantastic popper, and you guys keep making fun of me because of my fancy wine opener, but I know how to open wine.
But it doesn't pop.
We've said in the past that I couldn't open it because of my fancy bottle opener, and now I can.
Nice.
Here we go.
This is a red blend. It has literally 7 moons on the label, which is why I like it.
Yeah, it's like an eclipse. Or, well, it does this like the phases of the moon.
The phases, which is popular right now.
Very exciting.
Smells delicious. I might just keep all of this over here. And Mandy, you can go ahead and start talking about it again, and I'll just drink your wine.
Chuck just licked the microphone, so.
And those of you listening for the first time, Chuck is a dog.
Chuck is
And
my
she's
dog.
the
she's a girl.
sweetest. And she just hangs out while we record.
Most of the time,
Oh,
she
yeah.
just like lays down.
We just posted about
Yeah.
her recently too. She's always sad that we drink all the wine and don't
She
leave
got
any
her-
for her.
She got herself a mug
Oh,
from our
no.
store, popcrimeandwine.threadless.com.
Taylor.
Threadless.com. If
I
any
haven't
of
had
you
wine
couldn't-
yet.
Yeah,
Obviously, I can't speak right.
Taylor,
that Wisconsin
you don't
accent.
Wisconsin.
That's what you
I
get.
sound
You
like
choke
a
on your words.
Taylor, are you going to drink this wine without ice?
I guess so.
Oh, no.
Or do you want to go get some?
No, it's okay.
I think you should.
Well, let me taste it first. I'll see if it needs it.
It's very good.
It smells really good.
Oh.
I like it a lot.
Ooh,
dark.
I enjoy that. I could drink
dark
that
and
without
bold.
ice.
Just like how
Tastes
I like
like-
my men.
Like,
It doesn't make any sense.
they're like
right?
dark Concord grapes. Like that's what it reminds me of, like the real dark purpley grapes. Purpley.
Purple.
Am I not purple enough for the wine
for
club?
Yeah.
That's
Wait,
what
is that
the other grapes feel.
turtle? Am I
Yeah,
not
turtle enough for the
turtle
club?
Turtle.
Turtle.
What is that from?
And the
Master
Master of
of
Disguise.
Disguise.
Oh yeah,
The worst movie ever made.
It was
But
pretty bad.
also,
But
I'm gonna
everybody
watch it again.
has quotes from that movie. Or
I feel like it's really just that one.
what is the one that's like, you guys want some cookies? Is that from a different movie?
what?
I don't know that one.
Oh God.
I do want some cookies. Now that you mention it.
All right. Well, I guess we should get into the case.
I'm not going to start.
All right. I'll start.
You start.
All right. So John Wayne Gacy. It's actually John Wayne Gacy Jr. Although I found out that his dad's name is John Stanley Gacy. So I don't know why that makes him John Wayne Gacy Jr.
He was named after John Wayne, the movie star. His mom loved the movies. Did you not see that?
I did
read
not.
That
No.
Yeah, his mom loved John Wayne so much that she named him after him. But like,
I'm
He
really
did
glad that
not.
my dad didn't push for Laura Ingalls. Because it was good in the show. But not for my dad.
maybe just because he was John, they were
yeah,
both
just
John, so
Gacy,
they call
I
him
guess.
Junior.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That makes sense. Well, he was born March 17th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. He is the second of 3 children and the only son, so he had an older sister and a younger sister.
Yes.
Right? Yes. His dad was an auto repair machinist and a World War I vet. And his mother was named Marion Elaine Robinson, and she was a homemaker. As a child, Gacy was overweight, and he wasn't very athletic. He did have a good relationship with his mother and his sisters, but his father was a very abusive, alcoholic man. Gacy almost never felt good enough, and he never truly got his father's approval or his love. And he was beat with a leather belt when he was 4 for literally what was he doing? He was like rearranging some of his dad's belts and work parts, and he was so angry that he like beat him. Yeah. And then there was another occasion that he hit him on the head with a broomstick, making him go unconscious.
That's
Like, I think that's the part where you're like, okay, I think that my husband is too abusive to be around my children. They're going to become serial killers.
I mean, I'm sure she had her battered woman's.
Yeah, that's true.
You
But
know.
also, anyone out there going through this and watching your children getting beat with broomsticks, you should probably leave.
Call the cops.
Yeah, because it like pretty much makes him a serial killer.
It screws with like children's heads. I think that they like develop differently when they don't get approval and they don't get love and they end up getting, abused, and it's just doesn't end well.
I read that his dad was always disappointed because he was excited to have a son, but his son was too feminine.
Oh yeah.
And
He didn't play all the sports.
yeah,
that
and
he
he
wanted him
wasn't
to,
like
and
he
cooked with his
wanted to play
mom.
with his sisters and his mom,
Yeah.
and like he was much more interested in that than being the like man that
Yeah.
his dad wanted him to be. So he was always like really disappointed in him and like always telling him to like man up and stuff. And
That's so sad.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
sad. Well, at age 18, he became involved in politics, which is when his father started calling him a patsy. And he did end up buying him a car in 1962. He ended up like taking the car away and giving it back and taking it away based on things that Gacy would do. And finally, Gacy ended up driving to Las Vegas where he had found work as a mortuary attendant, which I did not know.
I didn't know that either.
How weird is that? Not weird, sorry. We might have mortuary attendants here, but get this. Did you guys read that while he was there, he ended up later on down the road telling a story of how he got into the coffin of a young deceased boy and he embraced his body until he felt like he had gone into shock. And literally the next day he like called his mom and he was like, can I come home? And
No.
And well, so then, yeah.
I did not hear
you
this.
did not know
No,
that.
I didn't
okay.
read this
I was like,
either.
yes, that happened.
No, you're lying.
No, you are incorrect, sir.
Yeah, so he like climbed into a coffin with a dead boy and just like embraced him.
And he's
And then he
fucked
went
up
in-
at this point.
Yeah, and he went into shock and then he was just like, I need to go home. So he ended up going home.
So he was like self-aware
Yeah, I feel
At
like
the
he
beginning
knew, yeah, there
that
was something
was wrong.
going on.
Well, I think that there were homosexuality was bad back then,
Right.
like anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that like if you suppress something long enough, then it becomes worse.
Yeah,
It's like with
and
allergies.
it escalates.
Yeah, like if you have a gluten sensitivity, but then you don't have any gluten at all, then you become gluten intolerant. I know that that has nothing to do with like killing people, but if you like suppress something for long enough, it becomes more of a severe thing.
Right.
And I don't think that he like wanted to like murder people in the beginning, but I think that like
It grew into that.
Yeah. From
Yeah.
what I read about him, I don't think that he was like a killer until later.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that story, so now I'm questioning.
Yeah. There's a lot.
So once he went home, he ended up getting a job at a local shoe store where he met his future wife, Marilyn Myers, or Marlin. Marlin or Marilyn? It was weird.
Marlin.
It like didn't have an I in between.
Yeah, it's Marlin.
Marlin.
Yeah.
It sounds so southern.
Marlin.
Marlin.
Marlene, did you get that? Did you get that card that I sent you for your birthday?
Hey,
I was a day
Marlin.
late, but I'm sorry.
So the same year that he was married, which was 1964, he had a homosexual experience with a coworker, or it was someone who was a part of his JC. Did you read about his JC thing?
Yeah.
Could you explain that? What is that exactly?
So it was like a community almost. I don't like, you know how men, well, and women, I
Well, like
guess,
those
but like
old
are part
dudes
of
that
like
used to
the-
wear those
like
hats.
the Elk Center,
Yeah, yeah.
or like, that's the Masons.
Oh, yeah,
That's
the
different.
Freemasons.
The Freemasons. They wear the hats because I had an
Okay.
uncle, a great uncle that was a Mason.
Okay.
But yeah, so this was like they were against like littering, and they like tried to like
Oh, so it was like a good club to be a part of.
did you read about how he would get people into his club? So he was part of this club, the JCs, and they all got together and they like tried to like keep the community well and like keep it nice or whatever. And he would get other people to join the club by throwing like big orgy parties and watching like porn.
What?
And he could get like 20 people a night to like sign up for this. So he had these like huge things. And I'm pretty sure he was married while he was doing these. And so he would like have everybody, I think they would go to like a hotel or something. Don't like quote me on this because I didn't write this down. But they would go to like a hotel and he would like play like illegal porn and they would like watch it and have orgies, and then they would all sign up and like to ban littering. It was a weird thing. And the JC like people made him the vice president or the president, and so he was like one of the top dogs of it. And then I know that at the same time, like he and his wife had a really weird relationship. Did you talk about that at all?
I didn't really talk about it.
Did you
too
know this,
much.
Mandy? I know
Like,
we
she
kind of all
knew-
like came together on this. We're like, oh, we all kind of like looked at
Right.
up John Wayne Gacy.
I know
so.
at one point he like she knew that he, was interested
In men.
in men.
He and his wife would go out, and then they were swingers. So they would like go and find another couple and swap, and he would take another girl home and she would go home with another guy. And like his sister came to visit one time and saw that this happened, and she was like, that was when I lost respect for my brother and my sister-in-law, just because they like pretended to have this like happy
Perfect. Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. So the same year that he married Marlin, he had that homosexual experience with a coworker / I think it was a JC club
Orgy
Yeah.
party.
how do you say guy from his JC club, who he ended up crashing at his house and sleeping on his couch, and they like ended up doing sexual stuff.
Yeah, he like woke
Drunk.
up with his pants off.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, we had oral sex or something.
Oh yeah, that happened.
I don't know
Hi.
how. It just slipped.
Yeah.
And after that, Marlene, her father owned a bunch of KFCs in Iowa and around that area. And so they ended up moving to Iowa in 1966, I believe. And that's when they started having kids. They had a seemingly normal life. A son, Michael, and a daughter, Christine. Literally a year apart, 66 and 67. And 67 is when he committed his first known sexual assault on a 15-year-old boy named Donald. How do you say his name? Voorhees?
I think it's like Voorhees.
Voorhees?
Yeah. That's what I would guess.
Yeah. So he had lured this kid to his house under the promise of pornographic films, which seems to be his MO.
I guess so.
Like, come to my house, I've got some porn.
It's just a weird thing to like.
Well, I guess back then it wasn't
It was
so
illegal too.
Yeah, it wasn't like everywhere. They had like what Maxim
dirty-
and like
Yeah, dirty magazine.
Yeah.
dirty magazines, but they didn't have
And,
like
They had
Go
tapes,
online.
easily
you know?
attainable stuff.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, oh, I can just pull this up on my phone and watch what I want. So yeah, that's how he lured this kid to his house. He gave him a bunch of alcohol, and then he forced him to, perform some oral sex on him. But that was kind of his demise, at least in the beginning. Because in 68, 1 year later, Voorhees told his father, and Gacy was arrested and charged with oral sodomy, which he was sentenced to 10 years. And guess how much time? I'm sure you guys know.
We do.
But listeners, guess how much time he served of his 10 years?
16 months.
18 months.
Was it 18?
So I
No,
found
16.
16 months and 18 months.
17 months.
Let's go with that.
Somewhere in there. Either way, it's not okay. Like,
No. Because
it's...
they said that basically he wasn't a threat to society, which is why they let him
Well,
out.
yeah, and he was like a model prisoner,
Yeah.
and everyone... Well,
He behaved.
you can be a likable person and still be a monster.
Ed Kemper, again.
Yep.
Sorry.
So he denied it, and he insisted that the charges were all politically motivated. And in 68, Gacy had another kid, Russell Schroeder, assault Voorhees to try and get him to, not talk and testify against him, which it ended up not working. But yeah, he served 16 or 18 months out of his 10-year sentence.
Crazy.
And when he got back out, that's when he moved back to Chicago.
Yeah, his wife left him.
His wife left him, and
Oh, she's the one that left and changed her name,
Yeah.
and she just went
She's
MIA. Like,
see ya.
Yep.
she gone.
She's smart. She knew. She was
Yeah.
like, I'm out of here.
She was like, this
I'm
To
gonna
is
this
take the
day, they
kids
don't
and
know
go.
where she is or what she goes by.
part of the witness protection program, maybe?
Either that or I guess they just haven't
Or she
pursued
got
it
out close
enough,
Yeah, I don't know. But
I do know that while he was in prison, everyone liked him so much. Did we talk about that already?
yeah, that he was just a
Okay.
likable. But
Yeah.
do you have like a specific story?
Well, they were
Is
talking
it-
about how he was the chef in
Oh
prison.
yeah, that's right.
And he like cooked, and like everybody thought his food was so great. And I mean, he used to work at KFC, so they were like,
right.
I mean, KFC knows how to make some.
I haven't been there in so long. I
Me
think
neither.
that I would enjoy it maybe
I'm
more now.
afraid that I wouldn't enjoy it, which is why I don't go.
Yeah.
Because I remember as a child, like how good the mashed potatoes and gravy and like the
Yeah,
chicken.
that might not be
and-
as good, but I feel like the chicken, how do you screw up chicken?
A lot of people do it.
Do they? Oh no.
I don't know. I'm a Bojangles kind of girl.
Oh, Bojangles. I could
I
go for
really
Bojangles right now. I'm
Love
hungry.
Hattie B's fried chicken.
Yeah, but I mean, not everybody can have that.
Yeah, only people in Nashville can have
I don't
Hattie
have
B's.
I don't get fried chicken ever. It hurts my belly.
I don't either, but I go for the sides. I'm a side kind of girl.
Yeah.
Like I go just for the sides.
This pole
It's like
is
some
right
mac and
in between
cheese.
your fucking eyes. So your whole face is cut down half and half.
My pole is right through your
Oh, wait.
face, but because I'm
Sorry.
in the middle of it, I can see your face perfectly.
So we have mics that are on boom stands and we're sitting in a circle. Therefore, some of us can't see the other person because the mic and boom stand in front of us. Just them.
Amanda's.
and Mandy, yeah.
Yeah, I can see everybody, which is great.
Everyone
I'm into
asks
it.
what we do. We sit on the floor in a circle, drink wine.
Yeah,
talk
we should
into
In my
our
dirty ass
microphones.
room right now.
We should take a photo of
Nope.
us, not necessarily tonight, but we should post like what a day in, the life of our podcast looks like. It'd be fun. Okay, back to the case.
Oh yeah. So he was a chef, and like
And they loved
everybody
his
in
food.
in jail loved him, and they all thought he was great. Just like going back to
Note to self, if I'm ever in jail, show my cooking skills and maybe I'll get out early.
so that you can be a reoffender earlier. Reoffender. I'm gonna use that as a word.
Reoffender. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
It's
I know
it's
what you're talking
basically
about,
like
but I'm
that.
trying to think of, is that the right word?
No,
A multiple offender? I don't know.
I don't know.
So either way, he gets out after however many months. He moves back to Chicago and he ends up remarrying. Well, he starts living with his mother and then he ends up remarrying to a woman named Carol Huff, who he dated in high school for a brief time.
And she had 2 daughters, and they called him Daddy.
Yep.
She was a friend of his sister.
Yes, she was a friend of his younger sister. And I think at first, what did she say? She was like, it's a little weird, but also they seem really happy, so
Yeah.
she's okay with
She
it.
was cool with it.
Oh, and while he was in prison, his dad died,
Oh yeah.
and he like
cancer.
yeah,
Or no,
Yeah,
last
lung
something
cancer or
of-
something.
No, his liver.
cirrhosis.
Cirrhosis of the liver.
Yes, that one. And he blames himself for it, and he thought that like because he went to jail for sodomy, his dad died of like
A broken
disappointment.
heart. Yeah.
In
And,
reality, he just drank himself to death.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like he thought that the reason why he did that was because he was, and his sister tried to like help him and be like, no, it's not your fault. He chose to do this. Like she felt bad for him. But from that moment on, he was like a different, like it was like, I think that like snapped in him too. Like, I mean, I think a lot of things snapped in him, but I think that like kind of pushed it a little bit further.
Yeah.
Well, so they had a good marriage for a little while.
They had a good relationship. They were together for 2 years before they got married.
Yes. And it eventually, I think that he started bringing home like porn magazines that was for men. So they're all gay magazines and gay porn. And she eventually found out, and then he just started bringing boys home, and like she knew about it, but I guess she was in denial or something. But really sorry.
A lot of the boys were from his construction business he had started right out of prison. So he had like a lot of like young boys working for him. So they were like, easy within reach pretty much.
Yes. And his excuse for telling people that he, hired young guys was because it was cheap labor.
Yeah.
And he couldn't afford to hire older, more experienced men. So that's why he had all these teenagers just hanging around his life. But actually the reason that his wife Carol ended up leaving was because he was just an asshole. He turned into a jerk, and
He stopped having sex with her.
yeah. And he
Well,
just
what
stopped treating
happened
her.
Where he was like, this is the last time that we're gonna have sex. He like told her outright. He was like, I'm just not interested in this. We're done after this one.
But like, I mean, if he was into young men, like, can you imagine, like, how's she ever gonna change?
Well,
like
he
it's
at
not-
first said it was that he was bisexual.
right?
Yeah, but
And
I
then-
think that once
yeah.
you,
Yes.
He
So,
obviously had a
choose
preference.
one.
So they got divorced, and she took the kids somewhere.
yes, she left, and then he was in the house by himself.
Yes.
But before that, he'd already killed someone.
Yeah.
The Timothy, the guy, the little, not say little boy, the teenage boy he found at a truck stop.
Yeah, Timothy McCoy.
And he was actually the only one that he stabbed, and I think that he freaked out.
Well, what's crazy is like he had brought this boy home from the Greyhound terminal, and he was like, this kid was going to Omaha from somewhere else, and this was just a random stop on his way. And he was like, you can spend the night at my house. I'll give you like a sightseeing tour. So he's like driving this kid around. He takes him home, and he ends up, you know,
They spend the night together.
They spend the night together. They do things, and then in the morning,
Which I think both were like consensual things.
Yes, it was.
Yes. In the morning, this kid is standing in the doorway and he has a knife, and so naturally he thinks that he's going to try and kill him or something, and so he's like defending himself, and he ends up stabbing him,
And he stabbed him multiple times. until he died.
times. Yep. And he goes downstairs and he realizes that this kid was making dinner and had 2 place settings, and he was just like not dinner, breakfast. And he was like going up to wake him up, and randomly accidentally brought the knife with him that he had been chopping something with.
And had made them both breakfast.
But he did say that murder was like orgasmic, and it was like the first thing that kind of gave him a taste for it.
Hold on, where is it? I have a quote from him that said, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill."
Oh,
That's
God.
so scary. That's so scary.
It's terrifying.
So that was in 1972.
And he ended up burying him, I believe, in the...
Yes. So
Was it
he
the
hid the
backyard?
body in his crawl space and entombed the corpse in concrete.
Okay.
Yes.
Um,
Wait.
The second one was in the backyard.
Okay. I'm sorry.
yeah. I have a
Because
list
I was
of
thinking
all
about,
of them.
because somebody said that they noticed, it was like some guy from work was at his house and he noticed this like patch of awkwardly laid concrete, and he said that there was a crack in the floor. Gacy said that there was a crack in the floor and that he repaired a crack. And then the guy was like, oh, that's really weird that, you know,
Well, he said
you
that
redid a whole piece of your floor.
entombed the corpse in concrete. I think that like it was in maybe like the garage or something. Like, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
it was
In
like
the
in a spot
addition.
where there was concrete.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't in the crawl space, but that's where he hid it until he could
Put
bury
it
it.
somewhere else.
And then 1974 was the first John Doe. That was never identified. And it was a boy with medium brown curly hair, believed to be between 14 and 18. And he was strangled to death by Gacy in January 1974. His body was housed in Gacy's closet and later buried in Gacy's backyard near his barbecue pit.
And all of these victims are between the ages of 14 and 21.
Yeah.
And most of them were workers from his construction company.
And most of them had long hair.
Well, it's the 70s.
Oh, yeah. I guess.
I guess it is the 70s, yeah.
My dad had long
I was
hair
about
back
to say,
then.
like,
Yeah, so did mine. I guess I didn't
Like, he
think
looked,
about
my dad
an
could have
MO.
been, you know,
I guess
like
I just
one of those
thought
dudes.
like, oh, that was what he was into, but I'm sure that every guy had
Every
long
guy
hair
had
back
it.
then.
Yeah.
Okay. So before his killing spree, he had killed 3 people. So the third one was John Butkovich, a 17-year-old. He was an employee of Gacy's, and on July 29th, 1975. So you have 1972, then 1974, and then 1975. That was the one that he handcuffed and raped, and then he strangled him to death with his belt.
Did we talk about the handcuff game?
Well, that
We
came...
can talk about
Or
that.
did that not?
That's
he
how
didn't
this
do
developed.
that with the third
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Did he not do that with
He
him?
did it with him,
Okay.
yes. But I'm just going to say really quickly that the way that he killed him was he strangled him to death, and then he buried him in the garage. And in spite of the boy's parents' insistence that police follow up on Gacy, the police considered the boy a runaway at the time, which that makes me so mad
Yeah.
that it could have stopped.
I
I'm not
feel like
blaming the
in
police
the-
for any, like, I'm just saying that,
In
like,
the 70s, there were so many
There were
like,
so many
runaways.
things, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's just scary to think that someone could think that and they're actually, you know, fallen victim to a serial killer.
sad. But yeah, so you guys want to talk about the handcuff game?
Oh,
real
yeah, the
quick?
handcuff game.
So John Wayne Gacy, who has the nickname of like Killer Clown, which
Pogo.
it's already Pogo the Clown was his character he played, and he did these events and everything. But what he started to do with these boys that he wanted to murder or have sex with and murder, he started playing this game where he would handcuff I don't know if he would fake handcuff himself or he
would
actually
like
would.
lightly handcuff himself enough so he could.
Yes. And so that he could get his hands out. So then he would be like, here, like, now you do it. And, you know, see if you can get your hands out of these.
And they would do it.
Because
they were like, oh, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, because they just thought he was a fun guy and, like, he was a clown. So, like.
And he was very likable.
Yes, very personable. But then he took out this rope and he was trying to just show them another kind of a parlor trick where he would put it around his neck. I don't know what did he actually do with the rope though?
Well,
he's like, we have to do this.
What did he say? He would put it around their neck and why am I blanking right now?
Well, because he would put it on his neck first. He's like, but I need to do this on you, and then I'll show you how I'm going to get it off. And then he would literally just strangle them.
Yeah, I saw one video where he talked about like he would take a rope and put like a stick through the rope and then turn it like a tourniquet, and all you have to do is like turn it like 3 times and then it like cuts off all air circulation. But he like would talk about that like as if it was like
a normal,
no big
like,
deal,
whatever.
Which is a monster. And then you can talk about 1976. So he had these 3 victims in a long space of time.
That kind of gave him the taste for it.
And then starting in 1976.
In 76, he kind of went on a spree and he had literally 13 victims. 8 of them were known and 5 were unidentified. So people didn't know who they were.
And then it kept going in 1977 as well. In 1977, he had 2, 3.
He had 11 attempted, so someone ended up surviving and running away, and 2 were unidentified.
I found that there were 11 killings in 77.
11.
But not attempted. All 11 were found in his crawl space.
Oh, I have 11 attempted. Well, either way, it's a lot.
Okay, yeah. And then 1978, he did
4, but 1 survived, which makes it 3. Is that the number you have?
I have 5. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, but only but 1, 2, 3, 4 of them were found in the water. So only 1 of them was in his crawl space.
Okay.
So I have 4 that were found in the Des Plaines River or near the river.
Okay. Well, and at the end of it, it totals at least 33 victims he had, which is astronomical. If you can really just picture like all of your best friends, there's probably not even 33 of them.
Yeah, I definitely
That's
don't like 33 people.
It's kind of crazy to think about that many people.
In
usually,
6 years.
Yeah, we talk about serial killers a lot, and it's like 3 or 7 at the most. You know, like we don't hear these huge numbers.
Well, he was 33. Was the most ever attributed to one person within the country at that time.
Wow.
And pretty much everybody that knew him testified against him when he got.
Yes, and he did get arrested, and he went to trial. I think what they say, it only took a couple hours, like 4 hours.
Yeah, so
for the jury to come back.
The reason why he got arrested was because he went to go get one of his employees or someone that he was trying to get to work for him.
Robert Piest.
Yes.
Or Piest. Piest? That might be right. That sounds right.
And they were at a convenience store, and his mom was out in front, the boy's mom was out in front waiting for him, and he was like, oh, I have to go talk to this guy about this job. And so his mom was sitting there waiting for him, and he went back into the convenience store, and then an hour later, the convenience store was being closed by the owner, and the mom was like, my son is in there, why are you closing? And he was like, no, he's not, he left. And
he left with?
Well, he said that he left, and that the other person that was in the store was John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
And that was when she called the police, and they that's
investigated.
yeah, that's when they started searching. And
in the show, they talk about going in to search for this one kid, finding this crawl space. It's super creepy. Like, it's under these floorboards. You like pull it up, and it's just like a trap door under the floor,
and it's
filled.
It's like 2 living room sized, like, rooms underneath this house. Like, it's because he fit 29 bodies under his house.
And they say, like, it reeked of death. Like, anyone who lived there had to have known or had gone there.
Well, and he had a roommate too at the time.
Did he? Oh, man.
His roommate like spoke out against him. But that was probably my favorite part of the first episode, was when they talked about going in there.
Yeah.
Just because it was the actual people that did it. Like, I don't know. It's interesting to hear, like, we watch a lot of documentaries and we listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff, but it's like our listeners listening to us talk about it, but we haven't actually experienced it. So I think what I liked so much about the show was the detectives who really did experience it firsthand and talked about going in there. And I think that's a little bit more fascinating than just like listening to, I mean, don't get me wrong, you guys should totally listen to us.
We do a great job. So,
but I think that it was really interesting listening to them talk about what it was like to go in there, and just they kept finding bodies and how heartbroken they were experiencing that.
And then all these families with missing children, missing boys, like, they're wondering where their child is, and then they find out that this awful thing happened. It was all very, very sad.
Very sad.
Gacy was put to death in 1994.
Yes.
And before then, he did do a lot of interviews and talked with people. And it's sad because he's such a monster that, like, listening to him talk is just like, I don't know. You just don't have any of that remorse or anything yet.
Well, also, I read about how he took up art after he was arrested.
Did he try and sell it?
He was, like, on death row, and he ended up selling, like, a couple different pieces for like 3,000 euros and 400 euros, but they're all like art about him, like
He's
some of it is
sociopath.
of him as a clown, and
Well,
it's like real weird.
Yeah, you can tell that everything is
It's
about
like sensationalized.
when his dad died, it was his fault.
Yeah.
Everything was all about him. It's like, no, your
Yeah.
dad died because you drank too much. Like,
So we have our interview next.
yeah, I'm really excited to talk to him about, like we said before, there are 8 victims that have not been identified.
As of 2017. So if you're like super up to date with the case, you might know a little bit about these more recent findings, but if you even so, if you know about them, it's really interesting to hear the perspective of the detective who's working on the case.
Perspective
Firsthand,
of the
yeah.
detective.
Oh, yeah, that should be a new t-shirt.
New t-shirt.
Perspective
Like
of
it.
the detective.
Yeah, so definitely stick around. We're about to interview him, and check out the show. It's going to be really great. We saw the first episode, and we're pretty excited about the last 2.
Second one airs December 16th on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Central Time. And I don't know when the third one airs.
The next Sunday.
The next Sunday,
which
okay.
I think it's the 23rd.
I can't do math, but yeah.
Yep.
I don't
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unknown caller.
Hi.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I was plugging my earpiece in.
That's okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank
We
you. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Yeah. How are you?
Busy but good.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time.
Hanging in there.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you for taking this time with us.
Oh, not at all. It's my privilege.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Here he is.
Where are you from?
Chicago. I'm from the south side of the city.
Here he is. I like that.
Well, I was kind of your neighbor then.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how about where are you guys at?
Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin, central Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
And I'm from Florida.
And I'm from Ohio. So we're there are 3 of us. I don't know if anyone told you about our podcast, but we talk about crime and we drink wine. My name's Taylor.
My name's Mandy.
And I'm Amanda. And
All right.
we live in Nashville.
Yes.
Okay. I sometimes drink wine and talk about crime too.
We were going to ask you what your favorite wine was.
I don't necessarily have I like Pinot Noir,
Oh, yeah. That's good.
but I don't necessarily have like a brand. I'm more of a cocktail drinker than I am a wine drinker, but I will have a good glass of wine from time to time.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. We're drinking a red blend right now, so.
We're not real picky.
Yeah, we like to just put it all together.
Yeah.
As long as it's red. Very good. So we just got finished recording part of the podcast where we told our listeners about the John Wayne Gacy case itself. Yeah, because I know that it's pretty big, and we kind of assume people know, but you really never know. So we wanted to give everyone kind of an update on what's going on, and then go into our interview with you so people would be knowledgeable, I guess.
Okay, yeah, you got to get the historical stuff down first.
Exactly.
I mean, because there's a lot of detail in this,
So
and it
much.
goes back so far, and that's kind of what we discovered. With interviewing people about cold cases, was that there's just a lot to cover. So we want to make sure that we kind of do things in chronological order. And I know that a lot of what is it called?
Deadly Legacy.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
I was like thinking of Harry Potter.
The Deathly Hallows.
Deadly Legacy. I know that a lot of it is just like more up to date information that was brought back to the surface by you. Are you the only detective working on this case?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I guess we haven't actually even introduced you yet.
Yeah.
For our listeners who don't know, you go by Detective Moran, correct?
My title is Detective Sergeant,
Oh, fancy.
but
Yeah.
but I've been called a lot worse things in life than detective. So if you either way, Detective Sergeant, or just Jason is fine by me.
Okay.
Wow.
Does that mean that you're like the sergeant of other detectives?
Yeah. So a sergeant is a supervisor. So in addition to my investigative duties, I am also a supervisor.
Oh.
Okay.
How much time do you get to dedicate to cold cases?
Well, I currently lead the Forensic Services Initiative, which is basically a cold case unit.
Oh.
So I do old murder cases, old missing person cases, human identification, which could mean a deceased person that's either fleshed or markedly decomposed or skeletonized, body parts. I try to identify them. And then I do complex deaths.
Okay.
So sometimes one death investigation, for many reasons, could be more complicated than the next. So take some specialized training and resources and things like that. So yeah, I basically do cold cases.
Wow.
Nice.
That's super cool.
That's really interesting. Well, I guess we should start kind of from the beginning and let you give our listeners an overview of maybe Deadly Legacy and what the show, or it's a docu-series, I believe, right?
Yeah.
What that entails, maybe?
Sure. Well, anything having to do with the Gacy serial killings is always a huge media thing. We've been contacted over the years many times to do these, to kind of participate in a documentary or a series on this case. And it's just because, serial killers, they're so rare, 1%, less than 1% of all killers are serial killers. This case is just particularly heinous.
Yeah.
It's not only because Gacy had so many victims. We know of at least 33 victims in 6 years.
Okay.
So we know that he killed at least 33 young men and boys in 6 years. But beyond that, it's because, it stays around because he had everybody fooled. Gacy owned his own business. It was a construction business. So he had everybody knew him, lots of customers. People would invite him into their home to do a remodeling job. he was involved in local politics here in the Chicago area. He was a Democratic ward committeeman. And so, he was out there trying to obtain votes for, and then he would dress up as a clown.
Right.
And he would entertain, children. Unbeknownst to them, there may have already been 15, 16, 18 bodies buried in the crawl space. So it's just the circumstances are just so heinous, and obviously what he did to these boys, it just keeps the story kind of going.
Mm-hmm.
So when we decided to reopen the case a few years back to identify his unidentified victims, we've had a lot of media outlets reach out and want to cover the investigation.
Okay.
And I guess for your viewers, I don't know if you prefaced it or not, or I shouldn't say your view, I guess your listeners. 8 of Gacy's 33 victims were never identified.
Right.
And, despite my police department's and the medical examiner's office best efforts, they were not able to identify 8 of the 33 victims. So the sheriff and I, Sheriff Tom Dart of Cook County, we got together as part of our overall cold case initiative and said, should we try to identify these 8 victims? And it's been really something overwhelming at times how many people have called and written and looking for, so desperate for help with their missing person cases that it's just attracted a lot of media attention. And that's the department eventually agreed to work with the Discovery ID channel and uncovering some of the highlights of the investigation.
So the family reached out to you, to the department, or did you guys reach out to the families during all this?
So what happened was, in order to identify, and we were going to use contemporary investigative methods to identify the remaining Gacy victims. And,
so the 8 victims that were left unidentified, it was pretty much just because of the time, right? Like, you just didn't have the technology back then.
Well, human identification at that time, in the 70s, early 80s, was primarily done through dental comparisons. So they would, you would obtain dental records from missing persons and compare them to the unidentified victims. So if we didn't have the dental records, you couldn't ID the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
DNA wasn't a thing then. And unless they had something else, maybe a prosthetic or a surgical screw or something in the skeleton that could help you identify them. But basically it was done through forensic dentistry.
So I know that Gacy did talk a lot about the case after he was arrested. Did the detectives at the time try and have him tell the names of the victims, or
did he not even
know? Did he not was that ever a thing?
Well, yes. To answer your question, they did. My predecessor, and that's one thing that the sheriff and I did prior to reopening the case. We got together all of the remaining detectives, prosecutors, forensic people, anybody that was involved in the original murder case. We brought them into the office and we sat down and we talked to them. And basically I interviewed them to learn what they knew about the case and who they thought these unidentified victims were. And through that process, and also through reading the case, I was able to learn that, yes, they did. My predecessors did try to learn the identities of these victims, but for many reasons, they were unable.
Okay.
And part of it is that Gacy didn't recall everyone's name. I mean, when you have 33 victims in 6 years, and a lot of these kids he just met that day.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he had some of them he had a long-standing relationship with, but others he didn't. So some Gacy didn't recall, his names. Or sometimes Gacy would tell you things that he thought you already knew.
Okay.
So he wouldn't volunteer information, but if he thought you knew it, he would tell you about it to make it look like he was helping.
Mm.
So for a few different reasons, they weren't able to learn the identity then.
Okay. That makes more sense.
So there was so he buried all of these victims under his house in the crawl space. Do you think that is the main, I guess, resting place for all these kids, or do you think that there's still more out there?
Well, 29 of Gacy's victims were recovered from the residence, his own residence, primarily the crawl space. But one was buried in underneath the cement in the garage. One was buried in the backyard near the driveway. One was buried underneath an addition. But primarily, they were all buried in the crawl space. The last 4 victims, he took out. He put in his car, drove out to a rural area, and dumped them into a river, the Des Plaines River.
Right.
But I think what you're asking is that is there more victims than the 33?
Right. Yes.
Well, there is no evidence or information that Gacy has any more victims than the ones that we recovered. Now, he did talk about throwing a 5th victim into the Des Plaines River, but only 4 were recovered. So he says that the 5th victim, there was a barge going underneath, and the body might have got caught up on the barge, or underneath the barge. Mm-hmm. But other than that, there is no evidence or information that says that Gacy has any more victims.
Okay.
But the sheriff, we spoke about this. How could you put it past someone so evil?
Right.
I mean, for a man of the 70s, Gacy was a traveler. He would travel all around the United States for both work and pleasure. And, in addition to being a serial killer, Gacy was also a spree killer. So he would go weeks and months without harming anyone, and then something would snap, and he'd kill 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, either within the same day or within days of each other.
That's crazy.
And we knew that he had at least, he committed 3 double murders in a day. He'd kill 2 boys in one day.
Oh my God.
Three separate times. So he was a spree killer and a serial killer. So why, when he traveled, how was he able to turn it off? Mm-hmm. Well, how could you put it past someone so evil? So we're open to the idea that he has additional victims, but we don't have any evidence or information.
Okay.
If you look at him, if you profile Gacy as a killer, he really tried to control every part of the crime, from who he chose as a victim to even concealing their bodies in his residence. So if you profile him as a killer, he probably didn't have any other victims, but it's hard to put it past someone so evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of the unidentified bodies that you did end up identifying, were you able to speak with the families, and what was that like them being able to kind of have that closure?
Well, yes, I was able to speak with their families, both in the beginning when I was just attempting to learn the circumstances surrounding their loved one's disappearance, and then through collecting DNA and other information, you start to form a relationship. And then when I was able to determine that some of the missing persons reported to me were actually Gacy's victims, you have to make a death notification. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to identify 2 of the 8 unidentified victims so far.
Wow.
And I've reported this to their family, their families after the investigation, and it's tough. Making death notifications was always the hardest part of detective work. I always hated making death notifications.
Yeah.
Especially in sudden deaths, but even in cold case investigations, where you eventually identify someone or you learn what happened to them, and having to go to the family and tell them what happened. There's no good way to put it.
Right.
Especially in this case, I got a report that your loved one was murdered by this evil man. And, most people know the circumstances of the case. Gacy was heinous. He he would rape a lot of these boys. He'd strangle them. You know, it was just a horrible case.
Yeah.
It's horrific.
It was horrible for the victims, and to have to report that to families is always tough.
Yeah, I can imagine the families probably had hope that maybe,
Right.
they were just out there living their lives like somewhere else. I guess if you never know what happens, it might be easier than knowing this.
Yeah, I mean, it's the plight. I always say that I've met with dozens and dozens and dozens of family members of long-term missing persons. People who have been missing for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And these families, they're some of the saddest people that you could talk with. Because they live in a cruel limbo where they don't know what to think about their missing loved one.
Yeah.
They don't want to think that they're dead, because that's like giving up hope. But it's been 30 years, and these missing people, there was no fight or disagreement or I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. There was none of that. That one day they were there, one day they weren't. And there's no reason why they should be missing. So to be holding out hope after 20, 30, 40 years, it's unrealistic too. So families don't want to think they're dead because it's like they're giving up hope, but they also want to be realistic, and kind of come to terms that they're never going to see their loved one again. And they're just incredibly sad people. So even reporting to some of them that their loved one was killed by this evil man is better than not knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That makes sense.
I thought, the sheriff and I spoke about that, are we doing more harm than good? But overwhelmingly, knowing the fate of your missing loved one is better than not knowing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a little closure.
With doing this, and without giving away too much of the show, have you found other missing people, like with all of these families coming in and giving you information about their loved ones, have you been able to close out other cold cases while working on this case?
Yes, and that's kind of the remarkable thing. Through reopening this case, the sheriff and I have been able to identify more non-Gacy victims than Gacy victims.
Wow.
So there's a whole series of boys and young men, missing boys and young men that fit the victim profile in the case. And if you look at Gacy's victims, there's a fairly clear profile. Because these were sexually motivated crimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Gacy was going after these boys so he could have sex with them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of put these boys up and you look at them as individuals, there's a pretty clear profile. So there's been missing persons that have been reported to me that fit the victim profile. But through investigation, we were able to learn that they were not killed by John Gacy, that they actually were killed by other men or died of other causes.
Wow.
There's also been a whole series of missing persons that I've been able to find alive.
Really?
Wow.
They've been missing for 35, 38 years,
What?
but they were alive and they were out there.
That's incredible.
That is, wow.
Yeah, you'd never hear that.
And then there's been a couple that died, but they died as an unclaimed person. Where they died underneath their name, but their families never knew it. So the families that have been reaching out to me, you never know what you're going to learn. Some learned that their loved one was indeed, that their worst nightmare was true. That Gacy did kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But some learned that their loved one was alive and out there. And, some learned the fate of their loved one in a different way. They died of an accident 35 years ago, and their body just was never identified until now. So it's really been remarkable how reopening this case has, how many different places it has gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Is it difficult? I know that you said that this is a very high profile case there. Did you get a lot of backlash when you decided to reopen this case, or did you have the support of like everyone else in the department? And in the community?
Well, obviously, the sheriff and I talked about this prior to reopening the case. And we just thought to ourselves, we never knew that there was 8 unidentified. I didn't know it. I didn't know there was 8 unidentified victims. I always thought the Gacy case was cleared and closed.
Yeah.
And the reason was that Gacy was arrested, he was prosecuted, he was convicted, and then he was executed for his crimes in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
So I assumed the case was cleared and closed. But from doing, part of our cold case initiative, going through some of these old cases, that's when we learned about the 8 unidentified victims, which really meant that the case was cleared because we knew who the killer was, but it was open in that all of the victims hadn't been identified. So the case status was really cleared and opened, not cleared and closed. We talked about it. There's tragic stories all over this country of murders and rapes and kidnappings and crimes against children. I mean, there's so many tragic stories, but we couldn't think of another homicide victim, another unidentified homicide victim that deserved more of a chance.
Yeah.
Or a second chance at identification than these boys.
Yeah.
I mean, what Gacy did to these young men was horrible, and it was very tragic. And we couldn't think of families that really deserved a second chance at knowing the fate of their missing loved one than Gacy's unidentified victims. And primarily for that reason, we said, let's try, out of dignity for the deceased, and out of respect for these families, let's give it a second shot. My predecessors didn't have DNA. They didn't have databases like we have now. Mm-hmm. So we were going to try to apply those methods and see what we could learn.
So in the show, when they re-dig up the bodies, do you have to go through a process to be able to do that with unidentified bodies, or do you, as a police force, is that your, I don't want to say property because I feel like that sounds horrible, but
right. Do you have the authority?
Do you have the authority to do that without having to ask about it, or?
So you're talking about obtaining
exhuming
biological.
Yes, from the body
samples from the unidentified victims.
Correct.
Yes.
All right. So yes, we do. You have to obtain an order of exhumation, and an order of exhumation is a document drafted by the police or the state attorney's office and then presented to a judge for approval. And the reason why that's done is because the grave space of a deceased person is a private place. So when someone is dies and is buried, entering that grave space is not done lightly. It's not done on a whim. There has to be cause to kind of violate the private space of someone's grave.
Right. Okay.
So, yes, in this case, it was a little bit different because there was 2 sets of body parts. At the time of the original murder investigation, when my predecessors sort of gave up hope on identifying all the victims, they removed the victim's mandible and maxilla bones, the upper and lower jaw bones containing teeth.
Okay. And
they retained them at the medical examiner's office for future dental identification.
Huh. Oh, wow.
And then the bodies were buried in 8 separate graves all over Cook County.
Okay.
Well, the bad part is about 6 months before the sheriff and I decided to reopen the case to identify the unidentified victims, the medical examiner's office chose to bury the remains.
No. Wow.
In a potter's field. A place where the indigent, unclaimed, and unidentified were buried at the time. The problem with that is it's an unmarked, kind of unkept part of a cemetery. So finding things, finding decedents after they're buried is sometimes difficult to do.
Wow.
I can imagine.
I didn't even know they did that.
Mm-mm.
Are you okay? So you were able to exhume the other remains. Are you hopeful that you're going to be able to identify them? Are you any closer?
Well, 2 of the 8 victims have been identified so far.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been inundated with leads for years. To date, I've probably received 185 leads.
Wow.
And they're all basically mini cold cases in themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So it's taken a lot of time, and I have a whole line, and I basically, it's not the only case I'm working. So when I get time, I open up another lead, and I evaluate it, and I talk to family and friends, and do research, and then try to see, to see if this lead fits the profile in the case, and what relatives are available for DNA testing. And so it's been going on for some time, and it's going to continue until I either run out of leads or the remaining 6 victims are identified.
Wow.
Okay.
I guess getting back into the show itself, was it strange having a film crew kind of following you around all the time?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not an actor. I'm a 20-year police veteran, and it's just kind of unusual having your work on camera anyway.
Yeah. For
anybody, I think. You got to think about everything. You can't. You got to watch what you're saying. You can't scratch your rear end. You can't. It's an unusual feeling being videotaped constantly.
Yeah. Did you have to sign something where they can use any clip they want of you?
No. There's an agreement that basically says we get to view the final, the edits, and to make sure that it's
nice,
appropriate and dignified. And
that does make sense.
That's good.
Yeah, I feel like the ID channel is really good at making. We talked about this in another episode, and how they are really good at like bringing the light to the victims, and how respectful they are to that, instead of just only talking about the monsters that do these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a good point, and it was one of the points that myself and the department kind of reiterated. This is really not about this killer. This is Gacy was an evil killer, and I don't want to bring any attention to him if we don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even refer to him as Gacy in my correspondence. I refer to him as JWG, only because I don't want to bring attention to his name.
Yeah.
To me, this, is about the victims. It's about the victims, their families. It's about unidentified homicide victims and giving them a name. They're obviously they were taken from this earth tragically, and they still don't even have the dignity of a name in death. And so I'm very careful about my families and that I work with, and that, the tragedy surrounding the dignity of the deceased. And, I'm very, and not about the killer, Now, obviously there's a historical component here that has to be covered. There has to be, we have to cover how these victims came to be. So
yeah, and I feel like part of giving them that respect is like knowing what they've gone through too. I mean, to an extent. I mean, I don't think that you need to know everything about them, but I think that it helps with the reverence of remembering if you kind of know like what they had to experience a little bit.
Exactly. I mean, you have to cover the context. You know what I mean? So the viewer understands the magnitude of what the investigation is doing.
Yeah.
And the Discovery was very good about it. I thought that everything was in bounds, and but it was something that I reiterated as we went through. I want to be careful about families, about the dignity of the deceased. What we could show, what we can't show. But in the end, it worked out good. It's just an unusual feeling, to have cameras following you around and having to, unusual things too, like. Walk through this door again.
Yeah.
We need that shot
I was thinking to myself, what did I
do it wrong?
Did I walk through the door wrong? So there's just kind of, and it's just things, even though I've been involved in documentaries in the past and a lot of media stuff, because cold cases tend to be, high profile cases. So I was sort of used to that, but this kind of long-term, docu-series thing, it was a first for me. And, you kind of become friends with the producers and director, and but it is, it is unsettling sometimes to constantly have a camera with you.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess we should end this kind of letting the listeners know how and where, obviously ID channel, but how they can watch it and when. And then they can put your face to, your name and be able to kind of feel like they know you somehow.
We feel like we know you now.
Yeah.
Oh, have you guys been watching some of the...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have.
Oh, yes.
We got to watch the first episode, so we could be prepared to talk to you. I feel like it definitely helps.
How did you like the first episode?
It was so good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm interested. I think they did a good job at like showing us what it's about and pulling us in, and
now we want to know.
Yeah, now I need to watch the next 2 episodes.
Okay. Well, then, so the first one was December 9th. The second one is going to be coming out December 16th.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah.
That's what I was
The
like
second one's
yesterday when the
December
first one came out.
23rd, I think.
So we're up to date. This
Yes.
is good. Awesome.
So they're each Sunday. So like
Every
next Sunday,
Yeah.
the 16th is the second episode,
And then the
following
Sunday after that.
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
Great.
I think it's maybe 10 Eastern, 10 p.m.
Yeah, because it was 9:00 our time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank you so much again
we
for
appreciate
doing this with us. And I mean, it's really cool it's really very cool for us to be able to talk to somebody, that is involved in the stuff that we, like to research on and learn about. So this was great.
Yeah, we loved hearing your inside views, and I feel like I learned a lot from talking to you about stuff that I had no idea about. So,
Well, where do you guys? Well, call if you ever need anything in the future. If it's information I could provide, or if you need clarification on something, feel free to call.
Definitely. That would be awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Detective Sergeant Moran.
Yes, Detective
I got it
Sergeant
right.
Moran.
I think.
Jason's
Jason.
easier.
Jason.
I was gonna say I'll just call you Jason, but it's fine. We'll grab some Pinot Noir together. It's totally fine.
Yep. Chicago.
Anytime. Let me know when you're around.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you again.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
All right. Bye now.
Wow, that was really cool talking to him and kind of listening to his perspective.
I also really enjoyed the Chicago accent.
Yeah.
If I
what do you
do
say?
say
Yes.
so. Yes, I can hear yous.
Yeah, I can hear yous. Also, I know that you guys might think that I was kidding about getting together and having wine with him, but
No,
I'm
I'd go.
not.
No, I
kidding.
would do it.
Like, we should totally.
I also did we get his number? Can we call him?
We should
again?
definitely get it. Yeah.
Jason. Jason, call us back.
Slip into the DMs.
Slip into the DMs. No, that was amazing. And this is the second Investigation Discovery special that we've gotten to interview for.
I feel famous. Is that weird?
Every night I
Dude,
tell Mark
like,
how
yes.
famous I am, so
Yes.
it's fine. I'm like, hey, just so you know, I'm famous.
By the way.
Like we
famous.
actually
didn't
got
know.
to talk to a detective sergeant,
Yes. Detective Sergeant. Jason
Detective Sergeant
Moran.
Jason Moran. Yep.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yes.
I can't. I'm just gonna keep saying how cool it is because I can't think
So
of anything else to say.
Cool.
I just,
Or do with my hands.
yeah, I'm like, oh, you both put your hands up. I'm impressed. Yeah, I just don't think that, like, I think, I can't even speak. I think that we're cooler than we are because it keeps happening. And I'm like, wow, we're so cool. But then I'm like, wait, we're not that cool. But then it happens
Wait a
again.
second.
And then I'm like, wow, we really are that
Maybe.
cool.
We're pretty I'm gonna
cool.
consider this.
I like to think we're cool.
All right, guys.
Yeah, so this has been really interesting,
And
this
fun.
Um,
episode.
Very interestingly fun.
I hope that you enjoyed the, interview questions we had. And maybe if you have your own interview questions that we should have asked, we can tweet him.
Yeah, we
Oh
can
my
always
God.
tweet
So
or
send them on over.
email. or-
Yes. We have a new review.
Do we?
What?
From one of our sponsors from long ago, Randolin.
Randy.
Oh,
Hey.
No,
Randolin.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Although I like Randy, I think it'd be really good. You should go by
It's
that.
cute, but she
She's
doesn't
gonna
want to
get
be
mad at
called
us for
Randy.
you saying it again.
It's Randolin.
With an I.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Wait, we don't know this person. Thank you so much for leaving us a review. Thank you.
How
for
many
thinking
people
that
are
we're
named
cool.
Randolin?
Not many.
You never know.
She can still
What'd
love
she
us.
say? Did she like us?
Yes. She said
Did she
these
give us
late
5 stars? Sorry.
Obvi.
Okay, just making sure. I didn't know if I needed to like disown her or something.
She recommends pop, crime, and wine. She said these ladies.
I didn't do it that time.
She said these ladies are amazing. I may be a little biased since Amanda is my cousin,
Hey,
but
hey.
for real, this is the only podcast that keeps my attention and makes me laugh out loud. Thanks for keeping it real, funny, and entertaining. With a heart emoji.
Aww.
sweet.
I
Thanks,
love
Randolin.
you. Also, she texts me anytime we make a like mistake on the podcast to correct me.
Thank you.
Like
We need those.
like the cancer thing,
Yeah.
or how I said everything wrong in the when I was talking about Hanukkah. She was like, "Oh, you're an idiot."
Yeah,
Here
you
go."
didn't do this right. Just so you know. Well, thank you, Randolin.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Yes.
And if you guys are listening and you enjoy us, leave us a review. We'll definitely read it on air.
Yeah.
And if you want to sponsor us, just get a hold of us, message us. If you want to go ahead and just send us some moolah, we have a PayPal. It's popcrimewine@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you can just give us some cash money.
We enjoy all the cash money.
Right
This
into
wine
our-
has
But
been real
we'll
good,
like
too.
put that money towards the wine of your choice.
Obviously.
So
Yeah, we don't spend money on anything but wine.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
Let's go on a wine diet.
Oh, God.
That we would
Yep.
lose all of the pounds.
Grapes, right?
Grapes,
right? Fruit and stuff.
Right? Fruit. Fruit salad in a cup.
I'm drinking my fruit salad.
All right. I guess we will
See you next Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay, Christina.
I almost said see you next time.
See you next time.
I was like, see you next, and I was about to say time, and I saw you guys say 2, and I was like, Tuesday.
Two-time Tuesday.